that to the cloud. So this will be recorded. We had some folks who said they weren't able to join us in person tonight, but they would love to get the content after we're done. So thanks for coming out. This is, in case you weren't aware, this is In It, But Not Of It, Finding God or the Devil online. This is the first of a series that I'm teaching. This is the first of 3 nights called Re-Emergence, Church Beyond COVID. And it's an opportunity for us as a community of learners and church folks to think together theologically and sociologically and practically. You know, we have just given, the church has just come out with a set of orange tier guidelines for COVID regathering. And, you know, we're allowed to do a lot of things we weren't, just a couple months ago. And as we head into the yellow tier probably this month and on, we're going to be, things are going to be slowly reopening. We're slowly going to be regathering. And I think that our safety team and our logistical folks and our administrative team are doing great work at the church in terms of, getting us ready for that in a health and safety kind of way. But I also want us to be ready for it, in a theological way, in a church way, in a spiritual community way, and to think about what does church look like on the other side of the COVID crisis, because, the temptation is always there, I think, to return to normal, but normal didn't work for a lot of people. And we've learned some things, I hope, over the course of the last little bit that will carry that wisdom forward. So this is the first session, Tuesday of next week, same time, same Zoom place. We'll have Where Was God Keeping Faith in Pandemic Times? And then on the 18th, we'll have the last session, What Can't Be Unseen? Seeking Justice After the COVID Apocalypse. But tonight, I would like to start off our session on finding God on the internet, online, with a couple of questions. And I'd love to invite folks to respond to one or all of these. So my questions are, what do you like best about virtual church? What do you miss most about physical church? And what questions, let's go back. And what questions do you have about hybrid church? And I want to pop back out into my stopping share so that I can see people's faces as we respond. So let's start with the first one. What have you most enjoyed about virtual church, about having church online over the last year? Has anybody enjoyed anything? Dale, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'm kind of here, but I'm listening. I really enjoyed the geographical variety. I mean, we're getting people in Arizona, Palm Springs, even in Lake Forest. Can you imagine that are joining us? And I sound facetious about maybe Lake Forest, but I think it's great that people who move away and can't find a church, anything like First Congregational Long Beach, at least not for a while, decide to join us and can be part of the conversation. I've really enjoyed that. And I've gotten to know people that, I saw for years and years and years in church, whether they have remained local or moved far away. I think that's been really cool.
Yeah, thank you, Dale. I agree. That's been the geographic reach is a huge benefit that we've experienced, or at least that I've experienced. I saw Tino and Kirsten both had their hands up. So I'll start with Tina and then Kirsten.
One of the things that has surprised me about virtual church is how much I enjoy the chat during the service, because it really becomes a congregational conversation. And it's kind of different from anything that I've experienced, because, normal in physical church, yeah, you talk to people, but a few at a time, moving around through coffee hour. And the sense of having, basically everybody who's online participating together is really special. And it feels like it has its own sacredness that I haven't experienced exactly in other ways.
Yeah, so I'm hearing that the service is even more participatory in some ways. Great. That's a great, I mean, I think a lot of people, we're not used to being able to have those kinds of conversations, or if we do, it's surreptitiously on our phones, right? Rather than having that be a part of the worship experience. That's great. Kirsten, then Dottie and Yvonne moving down the list. So Kirsten, go ahead.
Okay, first of all, I'm sorry this is happening in a group setting, but I have one of those names. So it's actually Kirsten.
Kirsten.
That's okay.
Wah,
So
wah.
I just wanted to put that out there. And I think I think this was especially true in the beginning months of the pandemic, but even now, I have enjoyed seeing the ingenuity and creativity of First Church. Like, it's almost like every Sunday it was like, what's going to get better, or what's going to surprise me or unfold in some neat way that, like, I don't know, everything from just watching the way we presented our music at the beginning to now how it gets presented, or how, like, at the beginning we couldn't see our flowers and then we figured out how to make our flowers visible, and it just little things like that have been special, I think.
Like Mark's feet, the organist's feet. We never saw those before.
That's very funny. Dottie, you're up.
I think as a very geographically spread church, even for those of us who are local but not right next door to the church, I have gotten very spoiled. I'm one who does not live in Long Beach, and it means that I have an extra half an hour or 45 minutes every Sunday to do something other than drive. And I'm not suggesting that I would prefer to do that necessarily, because I do like warm hugs and touching and seeing people's real eyes instead of screen pictures. But that's a plus I did not anticipate getting so attached to, that going to church is going to have a whole different meaning now. I mean, I'm going to really have to be very intentional about making myself crawl out of my bed Sundays.
Yeah, no, I totally hear that. The commute time, if nothing else, is a nice thing to be able to save. And then I'm going to do Yvonne, and then I'm going to move on to the next question. I'm sure people have other things, but Yvonne.
Well, I'm pretty much reiterating what other folks have said. For me, it's been a lifesaver as far as keeping me in contact with the people who had become my family. My family being one that's always been spread out, but for the better part of 40 years now, it's been First Church. That was my family. And to be so far away from them now is extremely painful. And so having the ability to participate, even at a distance, is a lifesaver. It's keeping me sane. And I love the nonsense that goes on during a church service. Brings a whole new level of enjoyment to the service.
Amen. We're glad you can stay connected too. I think I can speak on behalf of all of us in that. So those are, Bill, did you have something real quick?
It has brought us new, maybe not members, but new people that are participating. I'm speaking for my sister. She lives in Reno, Nevada, and she watches every Sunday now for our church service. She was not able to attend church in Reno because of physical problems, and she was brought up in a Congregational church like I was. So she's really connected with First Church Long Beach and looks forward to the services every Sunday.
That's awesome. And I think it brings out something that, having these kinds of online meetings and worship services, it improves accessibility, because whether you're a continent away or a state away, or whether you just simply, due to disability or illness or what have you, aren't able to make it to a physical church on a Sunday morning, being able to plug in through virtual worship or Zoom meetings can actually be really, it's a way that we open up to people with different abilities as well. And so I think those are all awesome things. Great, great takeaways from the last year. I'll ask, and I'm sure you have lots of answers, but we'll just go down the list a little bit. So what are things that you miss though? What are some of the things you miss most after a year of not being able to be in our sanctuary and worship there?
I got one.
Yeah, Dale.
I like to try to get discussions going. I don't like to dominate. Um, Tracy's mother, JJ, used to sit about three rows in front of me. And after church, she'd go like this and she'd say, "Tell me one of your jokes." So I tell her, this is JJ Halter. You know who she is, Bill. So I tell
Yes.
her one of my jokes. I dig something out. And she said, "Oh, thank you. Now church was worth it." I don't, okay, on the chats, you know me, I'm the wild punster, but it's just not quite the same as being able to tell a real complete joke after church to JJ. Okay.
Absolutely. That I completely understand the difference an audience makes, if nothing else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Other things that people miss, Yvonne, I see your hand is still up.
Yeah, it went up again.
Okay, great.
What I really miss is the people who don't or are unable to participate via computer.
Mhm.
I lose track of them. I don't get to hear about them. I don't get to get updates from Joel about how Mary Martin is doing. I don't get to listen to Gil and Chan and be part of the Liars Club. And I really miss the facility itself. For all that it drove me crazy trying to keep 100-year-old building in one piece, you know, there are sections of it that I just absolutely love. I love having polished the wood in the Pownell room and coming in and smelling that lemon and seeing how it gleamed in the sunlight. So I miss the actual facility itself in addition to the people.
Yeah, the space itself is I mean, any spaces, I think it holds that kind of memories for us, but we have a particularly beautiful one and a particularly meaningful one for a lot of people. Thank you, Yvonne. Dottie, I see your hand up, and Tina also, and then Bill.
One of the things that I miss is I was part of the most recent welcoming committee, and long time ago when we had a membership development board, I was on it for 3 years, the chair one of the years. And the ability to say hello to a new person, what brings you here, what are you looking for, and just having a conversation that's invitational and hopefully helps them feel welcomed to their new experience, and then seeing them come back another Sunday. That's just the best thing there is.
It's awesome. You're absolutely right. Thanks, Dottie. Tina.
There are a lot of things that I miss about physical church. I especially miss being able to hug people. I'm a really, touchy-feely kind of person. And so that's just really, something I will certainly look forward to when we can do it again. And of course, I miss the experience of the music live. And like they were talking about in the chat, Curtis was saying how, he could feel the vibrations of the organ, just that, the organ kind of going into your heart and vibrating. And of course, standing shoulder to shoulder with the choir and making music together. There's nothing like that. So I really miss those things. And, seeing people's eyes, there's so much of the soul in the eyes live, and just feeling people's energy, and just the building itself, which, after over 20 years of attending the church is really a home away from home, and has that special, community home feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. I, for one, miss singing with other people very badly. Bill, I'll have you be our last, and then I'm going to move us on because I'm loving what people are bringing up.
Next.
Yeah, you're next.
Oh, I'm sorry. I miss the children. I love going to church and seeing the time with the children when the children come up and get their lesson. and hearing the children perform now and then and just seeing them run off to Sunday school. And the younger people too, the high school students, the whole youth part of our church. I miss seeing them and being there with them. And I also miss, we have a number of people that are not participating on Zoom or YouTube because they're not computer literate. So it'll be great to get them back in touch with the church. I know, like Senior Coffee and Conversation, there's 5 or 6 people that went every month to our group meetings that have not participated in Zoom because they're cannot use Zoom or don't know how to use Zoom. And so it'd be nice to get them back involved again. So I miss those people also.
Absolutely. So I think what we're getting at is sort of the tension, right? That's inherent in there are some things that taking church online does beautifully well, and there are certain things that we really miss. And that, hey Pam, welcome in. So there are certain things we really miss about not being physically present. And so tonight, I want to think with you a little bit about how those tensions are kind of inherent in the internet itself, and how we can think theologically about, how do we bring the best of virtual church together with the best of physical church moving forward. So I'm going to share my screen again. Great. I'm going to pop out. And can people see my screen? Can I get a verbal yes?
No, I can't.
No.
Okay, I'm going to pull back in then. Let's make sure. The screen sharing ended unexpectedly. Well, that would be why then. Start broadcast. 1, 2. Voila. Now you can see it, I take it?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Okay, thank you. So, 2 quotes I want us to keep in mind as we sort of think through these ideas. One of them is from Paul Gordon Chandler, who is an Episcopal priest, writing in a book called We Shall Be Changed, Questions for the Post-Pandemic Church, that was published last year. And he says, looking toward the horizon, the church's new world will require a creative embrace of technology and new media, not as substitutes, but as inspired and strategic vehicles of ministry and mission. In this new world, the church comes to the people, and it must be willing to change much of the culture associated with church. And I happen to agree with them. I also happen to agree with Paul in his letter to the church at Rome. And I want you to keep this scripture in mind as we're moving through our talk tonight. So I appeal to you, therefore, brothers and sisters, Paul writes, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Here's the key line. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds, so that you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. And then he goes on to talk about some of the ways we might do that. Let love be genuine, hate what is evil, hold fast to what is good, rejoice in hope, be patient in suffering, etc., etc. Lots of good stuff there. Now, those 2 things, the church's culture needs to change to meet the moment, and the call not to simply be conformed to the wider culture is, I think, one of the big questions that underlies digital ministry, right? So how do we use the internet without being used by it? How do we allow church culture to change without being conformed to the world? And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what Paul means by the world a little later tonight, but just keep that tension in mind as we move through tonight. So I'm going to start by, we often think of the internet. It's so saturated our lives at this point, apart from folks who are, whether because they're technologically illiterate or they can't afford to, a smartphone or whatever, but many of us, certainly in the United States, have access to technology, the likes of which literally we couldn't have dreamed of when we were children, right? The technological landscape has shifted so dramatically and so quickly over the course of our lifetimes. And so Philosophers of technology are people who like to think about some of the, like, you know, ramifications of technological change in and particularly the way that it impacts, you know, our ethics and our sense of ourselves and the way we move through the world. And I'm going to draw on an article from the Atlantic back in 2012 called The Philosophy of the Technology of the Gun by Dr. Evan Zellinger. The Rochester Institute of Technology is a philosopher. And in it, he talks about two different kinds of ways we think about technology. So one is instrumentalism. And this is what you and I are probably used to thinking of most of the time. Technology is a value neutral tool. I've got a hammer here. A hammer is a kind of technology. It's an old kind of technology, but we think of it as, you know, a hammer is not morally good or bad. It's a hammer. You know, you can use it to do certain things. You can use it to hammer in nails, for instance. But there is a kind of naivete, he argues, about the instrumental view of technology, kind of captured by the phrase, guns don't kill people, people kill people, right? You hear this a lot in the gun control debate, that it's not that guns in themselves are evil, it's that people do evil things with them, right? But the gun itself is not the technological problem. And, you know, I know plenty of responsible gun owners. I come from South Dakota. I know a lot of people who are hunters and fishers. I don't really want to get into the gun control debate in this talk, but I do think, but what Zellinger sets up is he talks about how a different kind of technological view of the world would be, it's a technical philosophical term called perceptual affordances. And what that means in layperson's terms is that technology shapes how we see ourselves in our world. It enables certain behaviors while precluding others, right? So you probably heard the phrase, when all you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail.
Right.
Yeah, so having a hammer, right? There are things I can do when I hold a hammer that I can't do when I don't have a hammer. I can, like I said, hammer in a nail into the wall. I can smash a wine glass without getting glass all over my knuckles. I can, you know, destroy my computer if I get too angry at how terrible the internet is, right? Guns are very similar. This is where his argument goes, is that guns turn the world into a series of targets, right? I mean, you can do a lot of things with a gun. You could whack somebody with the butt of the gun on the head. You could use it as a frisbee. There are a lot of things you could theoretically do with a gun, but using it in the way in which it's intended, it creates a world of potential targets. And Zellinger and philosophers of technology argue that that changes the way we behave. It changes the way we think about our environment, and it creates possibilities that wouldn't have existed otherwise. It makes us perhaps a little ready to use the hammer when another tool might be better suited to the situation. So, what are the perceptual affordances of a smartphone? And I've got a question here, and I'm going to take 3 answers because I want to keep us moving. But take it back. So how has your smartphone, if you've got one, changed the way you see the world, yourself, or your behavior? If you have a cell phone, if you have a smartphone, how has that changed the way that you see your world and yourself, and how does that change your behavior? So I see Kirsten and Yvonne have their hands up.
I think for me, I'm like almost instantly aware of world events, good and bad, you know, sort of instant knowledge.
Yeah, if you're anything like me and you check your notifications on social media, then you instantaneously, somebody can tweet about something, somebody can Facebook about something, and we know exactly what's going on in, all the way around the world. It's pretty remarkable. But it also, we used to have to wait for the 6 o'clock news. We used to have to wait for yesterday's newspaper to learn about the world, and now it's instantaneous. Yvonne and then Dale.
I tend to find it intrusive. I can't get away from people. I can be out in nature and somebody calls me. I've got telemarketers calling me. I don't necessarily like knowing instantaneously what's going on in the world. If I'm trying for a bit of peace, that intrudes on it. My favorite use of my phone is actually the Kindle app on it. It allows me to read my books. Or listen to my music. That's my favorite use of the phone. Otherwise, all the other aspects I truly dislike. And I think this constant ability to use the phone to do internet or constantly check messages and such, people spend more time looking at their phones and communicating and interacting with their phone than they do with other people. And for me, who is basically a hermit and not all that fond of interactions with human beings, for me to say that, it's got to be pretty bad out there. I don't think people spend time with people anymore. Not really.
Yeah, I mean, you're bringing up, I think, as we're going to see, very real changes in the way that we relate to one another that come as a result of our phones. And I absolutely understand, particularly about, when you want to be in nature. If you've got a phone in your pocket, you're never really alone, and it's hard to have a spiritual life when you can never actually be disconnected, right? So, Dale, and then I want to keep us moving.
Well, my word is convenience. Some years ago, maybe 15 or 20, I got interested in what happened to the end of the Gospel of Mark, which is missing. There's a couple of fake endings that you'll find in your Bible, but it says, this isn't what was there ordinarily. Well, I went, I had to go up to Pasadena and dig around in the basement library of Fuller Seminary to find the book called The Secret Gospel, which is what I was wanting to see. All these years later now, Wikipedia, I maybe trust too much, but I can use my laptop or my cell phone and I can dig way down. Eventually you kind of run out of threads, but it's a sure lot easier than having to fight the traffic to go to the basement library at Fuller Seminary. So convenience is the part, as revealed by that example, that I like about my cell phone, is what you're asking about. And I do text messages and I do email, but I don't go any further than that. And I try to stay sane because I can answer Clarence, the head of the deacons, who's a lot of energy. He sends out a lot of emails. I remember years ago with the farmers market, one of the guys on the board, he dealt with emails on the fly instead of waiting to get home at night like I did. Guess what? I'm dealing with emails on the fly because they come in, important ones, pretty fast sometimes. It's convenient.
Yep. So the convenience of having all that information at your fingertips, the convenience of being able to respond to people instantaneously or near instantaneously. Mm-hmm. And so there are, again, we're hearing the tensions, right? So there's great stuff about it, and it changes the way that we think and move through the world in some cool ways. You can Google anything, but also when you can Google anything, you may spend more time looking at Google or Facebook or what have you than interacting with people around you. So again, it's not inherently good or bad necessarily, but we have these tensions built into it. So, gonna share again. Shuttling back and forth. Yes, start broadcast, please. 1, 2, 3, on. Thank you for your patience. So to go back. So we
lost the screen again.
You lost the screen again. Curses. All right.
Curses, Kirsten.
We'll edit this in post, right? Start broadcast. Okay. Let's see here. There we go. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. I'm working on my partner's iPad, and it's a little different than my PC. Better quality, a little bit different. So The film, some of you may have seen it, some of you may not have. The Social Dilemma. It's a documentary film about social media that came out on Netflix last year. And it, you can see that sort of the tagline, the platforms that connect us also control us. And I think this gets at a little bit of some of what Yvonne was talking about and I think it gets to this question of, if technology creates a certain kind of way of looking at the world, if it incentivizes certain kinds of behavior, well, what is the constant connectivity of Facebook, of Twitter, of Instagram? I'm showing my age here. TikTok. What are the kids using these days? I don't know anymore. But I think social media. I'm going to talk about social media because I think it provides a case study for the dangers of the way that internet technology exists in the world right now. Not because it's because those of you who are on this Zoom call, it may not be your particular technological addiction. It's a little bit of mine, but I think that it does point at some more general trends in the way that technology is potentially really dangerous. And especially when we think about building meaningful connections and relationships and doing church online. So I'm going to be drawing a lot in the next section on the social dilemma, just so that you know what I'm pulling from. And it's to give you a little sense of the film, it is a documentary that is largely built on interviews with former designers and computer engineers and tech tech executives from places like Twitter and Google and Facebook who designed social media platforms, who are the people who designed things like the like button or the notification system on Facebook. And so they're talking about how as things have kind of spun out of control over the last 20 years, they come to realize some of the dangers of this platforms that they created. And that's in conversation with sort of philosophers and activists and researchers about the social impact of social media. And so the question I want to ask, what is social media for? Right? I mean, so like, what's a gun for? What's a hammer for? What's a cell phone? What is social media for? If you listen to the people who own these platforms, they will tell you that it's about connecting the world, right? It is about, Twitter, I think one of its taglines is join the conversation, right? It's an opportunity to connect with people from around the world. It's an opportunity to, connect with family and friends. It's a way to keep abreast of current events. It's a way to share your creative work. That's what Facebook, that's what social media is all about, right? I'm a little more skeptical of what it's for, because at the end of the day, social media is a business, right? Facebook in 2020, last year, drove in $86 billion in revenue. And that was an uptick of something like $16 billion over 2019, probably because so many of us were stuck online last year. And so we were constantly using this platform. So, so at the end of the day, I think about this quote from Adam Smith a lot. So if you don't know who Adam Smith was, he was one of the original sort of economists and philosophers who laid out the theories of sort of, as capitalism was emerging in the 16th and 17th and 18th centuries, our modern economic system. Smith talked a lot about what that looked like and how it worked. And he was writing in the Enlightenment. And he famously said that it is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own self-interest. We address ourselves not to their humanity, but to their self-love, and never talk to them of our own necessities, but of their advantages. And he's outlining, kind of the way that the marketplace works, right? Is that, it's not like when I hire somebody to fix my phone, I'm doing it because I'm saying, hey, it would be really great if you could fix my phone for me. Be a mensch, please. It's, hey, I can pay you $100 to replace the battery in my iPhone, right? There's an element of self-interest in it. And so, that's why corporations under a particular economic system do the things they do, right? It may provide us with connection to friends and family. It may provide us with a way to keep abreast of world events. But the purpose, what is social media for? Well, to Mark Zuckerberg and his shareholders, it's to make money. So how do they do that with a free service? How do you make money from a platform like Facebook?
Advertising.
Well, yeah. So if you aren't paying for the product, this is a quote from the film, and I've heard it. It's a big line in sort of advertising lingo. If you aren't paying for the product, you are the product. More specifically, according to Jaron Lanier, who appears in the film and is a philosopher of technology and one of the pioneers of virtual reality, it's the gradual, slight, imperceptible change to your own behavior and perception that is the product. It is as these corporations, well, I'll get to that in a second. Dr. Shoshana Zuboff from Harvard describes how they make money as the unilateral claiming of private human experience as free raw material for translation into behavioral data. And she's the author of a book called Surveillance Capitalism, which gets brought up in the film as well. What does all of that mean? It means collecting your data and selling it to advertisers. Pure and simple. That's Facebook, and that's Twitter, and that's Google's business model, is keeping track of where you are and what you're doing and who you're talking to and which links you're clicking on and what you're purchasing on Amazon and how long you're spending scrolling through your Facebook feed. Literally, they can track down to the second how long you're looking at certain articles, how long you're how much time you're spending clicking through to other links, how often you're reposting, how often you're liking other people's things. And this gets fed into algorithms that then try to influence your behavior, that try to give you products that you might want to buy, that try to connect you to businesses that you might want to become a client of. They sell this advertising because it works, right? They wouldn't have clients if they couldn't have, if not a guarantee, at least a pretty sure bet that, listen, if we put this particular thing in this person's feed, they'll click on it. And if they click on it, that generates a couple cents or worth of advertising revenue, but maybe they'll buy something, right? So it's big data operationalized for advertising revenue. That's how these companies make their money. And in order to get good data, there are three things that social media platforms need, according to the men who designed the social media platforms in the film. One of them is engagement. They want to keep you on the platform. This is, I think, a bit of what Yvonne was talking about, people staring at their phones, right? They want to keep you looking at your social media platform, looking at your screen, instead of looking at other people. Because as long as you're looking at other people, as long as you've set your phone down and you've walked away from it, you are no longer a potential customer. You are no longer a source of data. You are no longer a potential buyer. They need you looking at your phone and keeping you engaged so that you'll continue to give them good data and the algorithm can continue to pop up advertisements to you. Secondarily, they need growth. They need you to keep coming back, not just for you to stick around on it, but for you to keep coming back to the platform and for more people to join. Facebook has something on the order of 2 billion users, I think. And it's the membership is kind of plateaued. So Facebook has been forced to look for other ways to constantly increase their profits. But so this is one of the other ways. They need growth. They need more and more people as part of their platforms. And then, of course, advertising. They need you to click on ads and buy products and engage in behaviors in order to justify selling your data to other companies. It's proof to their clients that they can manipulate your behavior for profit. So in order to do that, right? So that's what they need to do. How do they operationalize that? How do these companies go about it? It's something called persuasive design. And I'm drawing here, this is a graph from Jenny Odell's book, How to Do Nothing, Resisting the Attention Economy. If you came to my class on Shabbat that I taught during my candidating week at First Church, you'll remember I talked about that book at length. So she talks about how, Facebook didn't appear out of thin air. Twitter didn't appear out of thin air. TikTok didn't appear out of thin air. They were designed. and they were designed in order to maximize those three things I just listed, which are engagement, growth, and advertising revenue, you know? And so in order to maximize those, they have to persuade you to engage in certain behaviors. And so this is a list that is just, this is from the front page of LinkedIn, that a study that Odell quotes in her book talks about. So you'll notice, what is the persuasive vehicle? Right on the front page, you have a notification badge on the horizontal toolbar for notifications, messages, and network. How does it persuade you? It makes you want to click it and see new notifications. It arouses your curiosity. How many of us have logged in to Facebook and seen that little red number up in the corner? Maybe I'm just speaking for myself. Maybe I'm the only social media addict in the room. But you'd see that number, red color of notification badges on the horizontal toolbar. It stands out. It's like, ooh, it indicates urgency. I want to click on it. I want to know what's going on. Who's interacted with me, right? The numbers, so that you can be a completist. I'm maybe a little weird in that I sort of, I keep my email box consistently at, I can't stand having even one unread email in it. And so, you know, so it engages your base desire for having order out of chaos. You may notice that your social media doesn't always update you exactly when something happens. You'll get updates about other things that are going on, or a post that you missed, and it'll pop those in. And the designers in the film, The Social Dilemma, talk about this being almost like a slot machine, right? Like, it's like, ooh, if I look at my phone now, will I have a new notification? Who knows? And so it becomes this constant, it engages your dopamine receptors, because every time you see one of those notifications, each time that you know you've been engaged with, you get that little hit of, oh, this is nice. I'm connected to other people. I'm validated. I belong. I'm valued. These are all just a handful of ways that the design of the products themselves, right, the perceptual affordances of social media, to use some technical language, is designed to persuade you to behave profitably, right? It is a creator of behavioral addiction, which is, so this is a quote from an article in Jacobin magazine by Professor Benjamin Y. Fong called Log Off. So recently, a term for excessive internet usage has been popularized. The digital giants have long used to describe their desired aim: behavioral addiction. Behavioral addiction is very similar to substance addiction. According to Adam Alter, they activate the same brain regions. They're fueled by some of the same basic needs: social engagement, social support, mental stimulation, a sense of effectiveness. And like other kinds of addiction, it creates really dismal mental health outcomes. The film, you know, goes into some detail about the studies that have shown that heavy social media use and behavioral addiction to social media use, to internet use, it causes anxiety, it causes depression. Far from making us feel connected, it makes us feel lonely. It increases suicidal ideation and increases mental health contagion, particularly among young people who are the most heavy users of social media in general. So it's a platform that is designed to encourage this behavior because it's profitable, right? And that, to me, is bad. That's a bad thing, actually. And I want to pause for a second to ask you all, does anybody here consider themselves behaviorally addicted to technology? Do you know someone who is, right? How has that impacted your or their life? So this question of technology addiction, right? Who has experienced that themselves or seen somebody else who's experienced it? And how did that impact you? So I see Dottie, then Dale, then Pam, and then I want to make space for other folks too. Cool. So Dottie, go ahead.
I have experienced some addiction when I was not working, because I had all day and I could take as much time as I felt like. But I think, you know, when I realized that a day had gone by and I said, what the heck did I get done today? I think there is an element of personal responsibility that is kind of on a new learning curve because the technology is newish. I mean, it's not new today because it's been around a while, but I think taking personal responsibility. I mean, it's like you have a neighbor that wants to talk all day. You can let him waste your day, or you can say, I gotta go, my roast is burning in the oven, or whatever your excuse is to leave the conversation. So I think that personal responsibility element is a new learning we have to do that we haven't had to do before. And the other addiction that I think my little sister got me hooked on it, because she would talk about a family situation, and I'd say, how did you find out about that? And she'd say, well, aren't you on Facebook? And I'd say, yeah, I check about once a month. This was a long time ago. And so I started checking it once a week. And she would say, did you hear about? And I'd go, how did you know that? How often do you check your Facebook? So she took me from a month to a week to daily to multiple times a day.
Right.
But again, it's my responsibility to not let that happen. And I really am probably one of the most rebellious people I know about being manipulated. So if you want to sell me something, I will not buy it from you. I will buy it from somebody else.
You're a stronger woman than many of us, Dottie.
She's strong. She's from Nebraska.
Right.
She's got to be strong.
Go ahead, Dale.
Oh, just simply video game addiction. I knew a child, 25 years ago, who did well in school, but also was really good at video games. And he's a lawyer in Chicago now. But I also have a friend who lives here in the neighborhood who has a 12-year-old just turned yesterday 13. And he's really not controllable. And he's literally playing video games all night long, every night, and sleeping in until 1 or 2 o'clock. And I'm very concerned about him because he's, as far as I'm concerned, addicted to video games. And I don't see him. He's not balancing out by doing well in school. That's why I'm concerned.
Sure. Yeah. No, I can hear that. Thanks, Dale. I saw Pam and then Tina.
Yes, I'm not addicted because I don't have a smartphone. I'm probably the only person here who's still got a flip phone. But I see people that I consider to be addicted. I mean, I'll be out on the golf course, and my one friend, I mean, if her phone dings, I mean, doesn't matter where she is, she'll pull it out and read and text back. If you're at a restaurant, I remember I looked over at these 2 women who came in, they sat down, pulled out their smartphones and read their smartphones and had no dialogue with each other. And I'm thinking, why do you go to lunch with someone if you're not going to have a dialogue? I mean, I just find it very sad. But I find I came on late. I thought this started at 7:30, so I missed a half hour of this. But I'm really enjoying your class and learning more about technology. I've heard some of this stuff before, but I'm learning a lot.
Good. Thanks, Pam. Yeah, and I think there is that thing of like, sometimes you just go and, I mean, sometimes Satya and I will sit in the same room together and we'll both just be, mucking about on our phones. And it's like, wait a minute, surely we have something to talk about, right? So I completely hear that. Tina, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just really tend to be actively resistant to social media as much, to a large extent. I participate a little bit, but I think it's partly because I'm by nature contemplative and I just don't like to be disturbed. So I'm extremely protective of my time and especially my creative time. And so, like with email, it's like the last thing I do in my workday, and I get through it as fast as I can. I was extremely resistant to getting a cell phone because of the health hazards and just not wanting the invasiveness. So I finally broke down and got a smartphone in 2018 because my dad said, don't come visit me unless you have a cell phone, so that so that we could call him when we were approaching the gate of his community, so he would know to come out, and let us in. So yeah, so the thing that we like the most, Jose and I share one phone, and the thing we like the most about it is taking pictures. And I don't give the phone number to very many people. I resist using apps or anything like that. I, go on Facebook once in a while just to, see, a few things about what people are doing. But I saw The Social Dilemma last year, and then we watched it again for Sacred Practices. It had a discussion on it. And I'm really, really concerned. I mean, it fits the fact that I'm already concerned about these things anyway, but I'm deeply concerned about how we can, not all go over the cliff like lemmings, and, how we can turn this around somehow, have more regulation of social media, and and as a church, if there are ways to communicate, if maybe there's a different way to communicate that doesn't have the ingrained behavioral patterns that Facebook has. I know some people have totally sworn off Facebook because of it's, the election stuff and all of that. I haven't done that yet, but I'm deeply concerned. And so I'm really grateful for this opportunity to think about it and talk about it together.
Thanks, Tina. Yeah, I mean, I barely use Facebook now. I actually, because of the elections, had to get off. It was, maybe you've had the experience of having to deal with just weapons grade bad takes from people you thought you knew, or people who were there in your childhood, or people who you went to college with, and are like, oh my God, how can we believe some of the things we believe? And then at least if you're anything like me, your impulse is to get into an argument about it. And God, an argument on the internet is always a useful exercise, isn't it? I'm actually gonna talk about how arguments on the internet are kind of incentivized by the very structure of social media. Dottie, I see your hand is still up. Is that left over, or did you have something else you wanted to add? I'm gonna assume it's just left over. Did anybody else have any comments on this question? I know we have some folks who have been quieter, and nobody's required to talk, but if you have something, I'd love to hear it. Kirsten, did I see your hand put up there? Go for it.
Just can't help but think of it from as a parent. When we started, you said something like, you referenced the view of technology as this neutral thing. And before you even got to the second half of your sentence, in my head, I'm like, it's not neutral. Because as a parent, it's very scary. The lure of technology, of social media, of just anything electronic and digital. And, we were a Waldorf family for a number of years. And it's kind of scary, because you think about, these parts of our brain that are related to addiction and behavioral addiction and those kinds of things. They're not even formed yet in adolescence. I don't even think they're fully formed till we're like 25. And it freaks me out, because the lure is so strong in adolescence, and you also have to pick your battles as a parent. And so it's just, I'm appreciating this, because there's a big tension there.
Oh yeah. Satya and I have been very, because we just have a new kid, right? So this is something we have to start thinking about. I mean, he's not going to start using a phone anytime soon, God willing. But it's completely limiting screen time. And, I don't think Ari will have any kind of technological device that connects to the internet before he's in college. Let's say that he's in college. I think we'll do it. I think we'll just straight across, because I'm scared about it too. I'm scared about the idea that I don't put pictures of his face on social media, because I don't want facial recognition technology picking up the contours of my baby's face as he ages, and I don't want his picture out there. And I don't blame anybody who puts pictures of their kids on Facebook or whatever. Like, this is the world we live in. I don't think it's people are being like wildly irresponsible. It's just something I'm flat not willing to do for some of the reasons that we're talking about tonight and that you totally brought up, Kirsten. So thank you. Pam, you had something else.
Well, no, I had a question. I don't know, excuse me, what a Waldorf family is.
Oh, I'm sorry. We didn't have a TV for a couple of years. We didn't have any electronic devices. We had her playing with like really natural toys. And the idea was to let her brain have time to develop without electronics. I mean, it's all, who knows what's right? As a parent, you just sort of do the best you can and try to live with intentionality, like talks like this help us do. But we so it's such a contrast now to feel like, there's this pressure for cell phones and those kinds of things.
So I think we all probably have experience either in our own lives or in the lives of people we know and care about this behavioral addiction to technology, to social media, to video games, to what have you, right? I think that's something that is so pervasive that it would be hard not to know somebody, at least living in the United States as we do, who's not touched by that. But wait, there are more awful things about Facebook and social media. It's, maybe you've noticed, and we were talking about this like during the elections, no matter what your political perspective is, when you go on social media, when you go on the internet, you notice people are very, very mad all the time. It's a kind of outrage machine. And this is because emotional posts get more engagement. They get 40% more engagement, some studies have shown. So if you post a news story and you give just a kind of a flat account of it, or even just your opinion, but your opinion in a measured and kind of reasonable way, versus if you post it with exclamation points and emotionally laden words and expletive laden sentences, the latter will always win. The latter always wins in terms of engagement. And so those are the kinds of posts that the algorithms that they favor. And so you get this increasingly just high emotional tenor of people's expressions of politics or opinions about anything, really. Don't go into like people who are maybe Ethan can follow me on this, like don't go into the fandoms of a Doctor Who or a video games or any of that stuff, because people have very strong opinions and will express them in the strongest possible terms about fictional characters, right? It's bananas out there, folks. It's bananas. And this can lead to social media bubbles. If my Facebook feed had voted in the Democratic primaries in 2020, then Elizabeth Warren would have been the candidate with 90% of the vote, right? Like that's the bubble that my particular group of professional class liberals lives in. And so you look around and that happens on social media all the time, no matter what your political perspective is, right? And this has the effect of, it has a political siloing effect. We don't end up talking because the algorithm gives us what it thinks we want, and it sees that, oh, you like this post, you like this tweet from President Donald Trump. Okay, we'll have some tweets from Sean Hannity. Oh, you like this tweet from Bernie Sanders. Well, here, have some tweets from Jacobin Magazine, whatever, right? And it by predicting our behavior or attempting to predict our behavior algorithmically, it just gives us more of what we think it wants, and we can get into these really self-referential bubbles where we don't actually talk or hear from people who don't believe the same things as us. And this can lead to, you've probably heard of, quote unquote, cancel culture. And I don't want to get into what that is or what that is not. I think it's a complex discussion. But the fact of the matter is that online hate mobs happen. People get piled on Twitter or on Facebook. and that it can lead to cyberbullying, it can lead to mob abuse. And part of this is because of the anonymity effect. I mean, I'm just kind of going down the list here. The idea that studies have shown that we behave worse when we're not face to face. Without that reference point of another human being in front of us, we're nastier, we're more cutting, we're more sardonic, and especially when we can take the time to write out the perfect zinger, right? So the anonymity effect can make us behave in wildly worse ways than we would in person. That doesn't even touch on, so that's just the algorithm doing what the algorithm does naturally in terms of trying to generate engagement. In Shoshana Zuboff's work, she showed, these, and this is talked about in the Social Dilemma film, contagion studies. So Facebook actually wanted to see if it could manipulate people's behavior, political and emotional behavior, without them knowing it was being done. And so they decided they wanted people to vote in the 2014 midterms. And they didn't want them to vote for any one person in particular, but they decided they were going to try to gin up election participation. And the algorithms were adjusted so that people would get more content that was geared toward getting them to vote. And they did. There was a statistically significant impact of Facebook's algorithm tweak. And that may seem like maybe a generally good thing, although, it depends on which side you want to win. We wanted to press turn on the other side, and it's a democracy. I'm getting into the weeds here. Okay, so, but the other one was they wanted to see whether they could make people happier or sadder based on what algorithm tweaks, right? And so they did that. So that different kinds of posts would appear in your feed, ones that were higher emotional tenor or lower emotional tenor, more happy keywords, fewer happy keywords, or sad keywords. And they found that they could produce a statistically significant impact on people's emotional experience without them knowing. Somebody behind the scenes at these tech corporations decided, we're going to do a mass experiment just for funsies, I guess, to see if we can. And that may, those small examples may not seem like the worst thing in the world, but the problem becomes when these algorithms that are built for profit and built to gin up engagement and reward incendiary and emotionally laden behavior, you get a hold of something like a QAnon conspiracy theory, right? You get a hold of, and fake news spreads 6 times as fast on the internet. 6 times faster than real news, because it's so emotionally laden, because it takes place in this kind of Facebook bubble. If you've ever tried to talk to somebody who's into QAnon or into any other conspiracy theory, it's like talking to a wall, because when you surround yourself in that bubble, then you become immune to critique from the outside. And what you end up getting is people like the QAnon shaman here, who showed up at the riot at the US Capitol on the 6th of this year. This has this kind of political radicalization has real world consequences. And it's part and parcel of the same algorithms that are generating profit for Facebook's shareholders and that are trying to sell us things. And this is what the French philosopher and social theorist Guy Debord would call the spectacle. We live in a spectacular society, not in the sense of a great society, but in the sense of, so this is a quote from Debord. The spectacle is an affirmation of appearances and identification of all human social life with appearances. All having must now derive its immediate prestige and its ultimate purpose from appearances. If you think for just a second about the concept of taking a picture of your food and sharing it on Instagram so that you can get strangers to validate your dinner, it becomes clear that he was onto something. He was writing in 1967, and he was thinking of kind of the manipulation of mass media and the way, but he was really thinking about how these forms of technological development and this social system, what he calls the spectacle, it's not about what's real, right? It's not about those human connections. It's not about hugging somebody in church. It's not about those, it's not about connecting somebody from across the country to their church community halfway across the country. It's about creating an idealized version of what we're supposed to be, of what the world is supposed to look like. And that's what becomes real. The more time we spend on our phones and the more time we spend on social media, the more and more that takes on the veneer of reality, and our actual lives take on the veneer of unreality. De Boer writes that this reduces us to spectators of our lives instead of agents, instead of co-creators. Politics is reduced to aesthetics, and it's enough for politicians to say things or to make the right tweet without actually having policy to back up their commitments. Solidarity with oppressed peoples becomes performance, where we wear the right t-shirt or we put up the right banner, but when push comes to shove, where are the feet on the ground? Where is the solidarity? Our physical reality gives way to virtual unreality. The amount of time I spend looking at my phone is upsetting to me personally. And so physical reality becomes this kind of virtual, not really a real world that we engage in, that keeps me actually from engaging with the people right in front of me. And ultimately, it takes us from a meaningful and purposeful existence, De Boer argues. The spectacle takes us into one of alienation, of loneliness, of anxiety, exactly what we were talking about with behavioral addiction. This is the world to which we are being conformed by our technology, much of our technology at least. And I can't help but think of this quote from Romans, Paul's letter to the Romans. It's earlier than the quote we started with, but I do not understand my own actions. For I do not do what I want, but I do the very thing I hate. Now, if I do what I do not want, I agree that the law is good, but in fact, it is no longer I that do it, but sin that dwells within me. For I know that nothing good dwells within me, that is, in my flesh. Hold on to the language. I'm going to get to this in a second, but just follow the thread. I can will what is right, but I cannot do it. For I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I do. It's a little confusing, but I think about the idea of addiction that you find in 12-step programs, of the idea that your addiction is this thing over which you are powerless. You need to surrender your will to something bigger, this idea that, I don't like how many times I've looked at my phone during the course of our conversation. And part of that is because my outline is on my phone. So it's very convenient that way. I didn't have to print it off, save a tree. But also, it's so built into the way that I interact with the world now, the sort of constant checking of the phone. And willpower, definitely. I mean, Dottie, you're absolutely right. We need to be able to have discipline. This is in order to not engage in these kinds of addictive behaviors. And we're constantly being encouraged to engage in these addictive behaviors. So maybe I'm taking away as one of the lessons tonight of logging off, of actually getting away from it. But I can't get away from this fact that these are things that are incentivized. These are things that the technology is designed for. As Kirsten was saying, it's not value neutral. And I would argue that it's co-opting our God-given desire for connection and belonging and making us strangers to ourselves. Shoshana Zuboff puts it this way: surveillance capitalism and its illegitimate use of knowledge to power is best understood as the normalization and the institutionalization of information warfare for profit. And hey, who cares if this schmuck makes a boatload of money, right? So, what do? What do we do about it? Look, let's take it, let's take it back, actually. I've talked about a lot of theory. I've given a lot of examples here. I would love to hear, just a more general, for a couple minutes here, at least, if anybody has some reflections or thoughts, like what do we do about it, right? Like all of this is something that's been happening around us. It's happening to me. It's happening to people of my generation. It's happening to, your uncle who got sucked into QAnon. It's happening to your teenage friend who can't log out of TikTok and a mobile game. What do we do? Dale, do you have some thoughts?
Well, maybe a little old fashioned, but my tentative, I mean, this is old fashioned, retreats, small group games. And I'll give examples. When I was a young Presbyterian minister, I used to take backpacking trips to the high Sierras, high school kids, college age kids. You know, we'd hike for 5 or 6 or 7 days, and we'd have our little, well, just mimeograph paper lessons. So they were light, they weren't books. And you know how it would be at the end of a week without, this was before cell phones, but without anything just except you, your people, small groups, yodeling contests, singing around the campfire. I mean, you know, you come back, you know what this is like. And it's like, oh my God, you know, we created a really pleasant world this last week. And it's kind of hard to re-enter the, you know, what I call the big city, which is just kind of a mess. But, and then the other thing is small groups. And I'm not saying I do enough of this, but I remember one small group meeting with a young man who was about 16 who had to watch his 2 younger brothers, and his mother just wasn't much help. She turned the kids over to their older brother. We were in a circle one time, about 5 people, and we did a strength bombardment. Has anybody ever heard of a strength bombardment? Okay, one at a time, we went around and all the other people said all the good things they could think of that were true about one person at a time. And when we did that with this Bill Wagner, he was in tears. He had not ever received compliments in his life that he could remember. It was amazing. Of course, his home situation was very stressful. It wasn't quite as bad as what many would go through, but that was a real moment of growth and connectivity in the church with other real live people. That he had an aha experience because we told him how much we appreciated him without knocking the props out from under him the next minute.
Thanks, Dale. It's a great story, and I think a reminder of one of the things that's really possible when we've created those kinds of bonds in physical reality with one another. Absolutely, Judy.
Yeah, I was going to say a similar thing. I mean, we're like Kirsten kind of in the trenches with this, all with having teenagers, and one of them's listening, so I won't speak much, but it is like, it's just something to be really intentional and thoughtful about. And there is just a reality of that's kind of where our world is. My sister-in-law wrote a book about all this, actually, and we're still kind of trying to figure it out. But the main thing that we've learned from her and her research has been really intentionally doing embodied things. And as we kind of are able to do that, really intentionally look at like the kayaking trip or the the park thing the other day, and just to give a plug, we're trying to do this outreach thing over the summer to just really like embrace community and really trying to be present. And so that's going to be a big thing, I think, with the church going forward, is while I didn't say earlier, but pajamas are like going to be a really hard thing to not have on Sunday mornings. I might be showing up in my pajamas, but I'm with Dottie on that one. So I think really intentionally looking at how we can do embodied balancing activities is my only thing.
Yeah, thanks, Judy. I think that's really important. Dottie.
Again, seconding what Judy just said, I think, again, it's that taking personal responsibility. But one of the things that I have found unbelievably wonderful is I'm in contact with relatives that I had, I'd see them maybe every 7 to 10 years at a family reunion. Their kids would be born and grown up. And now I can see pictures of their toddlers starting to walk, or their teenager, first day of high school or graduation or whatever. And I think what kinds of things we watch, how often we watch, how long we watch is completely in our control. It really is. And I don't care how hard the manipulators try to do their job, they're not going to win if you don't let them. And I just think that the payoffs to me are so far above the costs or the negative stuff that I'm willing to be in the position. And sometimes I'll be, I will get caught up for a little bit and I'll go, wait a minute, how's this thread I'm following nourishing my life? It's really not. And so I stop and go find something a cousin wrote or a long lost friend that I haven't talked to for a long time. So I think being intentional and taking personal responsibility are probably two of the biggest things that are what we need to practice and solve some of these problems.
Thanks, Dottie. Yeah, absolutely. I like your sort of, if I'm going to be on the platform, let's at least use it to connect with somebody I know and somebody real. Absolutely. Tina.
Yeah, also echoing the folks have already spoken. So we in sacred practices, we watched the social dilemma. We had a discussion. We watched a conversation, part of a conversation with John Kabat-Zinn, and I'm forgetting the name of the fellow in the social dilemma, kind of the main one who was speaking on the stage, blanking out on his name, but anyway. And so they were basically advocating awareness, that people know what's going on and, come into the situation with awareness, as Dottie is saying, and make choices and resist manipulation. For instance, I never click on ads. I never do anything that's presented to me. I go find my own thing. So I think that's one part of it is, monitoring our own behavior is one thing that's open to us. And then I think there are creative ways of using the technology, maybe even going against the grain in some way, because one of the outstanding experiences, over the course of the pandemic has been the church Zooms in general and the way we've used, YouTube and chat and all of these things, but in particular, sacred practices. We have Zooms where we meditate together. And so there's silence, there's like just gazing into each other's eyes. And even though we're separated, it generates such a sense of connection. And I have to really give huge, props to Bob Kalajian for, kind of inventing a way to use the technology that goes so much against the grain of how it's probably usually used. So those possibilities are there. And then as Dale was talking about, people interacting in person, interacting in small groups. One of the opportunities I think that's before us as we start to regather is to be able to do it really mindfully and heartfully, and not just try to, go back to rote routines, but to really experience the presence of being together and the sacredness of that, and the thirst and the hunger that we've all felt for connection, and to let ourselves be present to that and be present to the sacredness of that connection as it happens. And that's I think a really powerful opportunity that's before us.
Amen. Thank you, all of you, for sharing. I mean, I think these are all I should probably just not do the last couple of slides I have, which are where I offer my thoughts, because you all have articulated it so beautifully. I often joke in services, when somebody like Carlos or Megan O'Toole sings, I'm like, but just end it here. I don't need to preach a sermon. It's over. It's fine. You've taken care of it. But I am going to finish off here. So these are all great ideas, and I think this, I'm going to echo a lot of what people have been saying about how we can be more intentional about our use in church, certainly, and also in our personal lives, of course, with our use of technology and our use of the internet, and the extent to which we allow ourselves to be conformed to that world. I also want to respect that we've got, 8:30 is the time when the class is scheduled to end. So if you need to jump off, please do so. I will probably take a couple extra minutes to finish up my slides, and then if people want to stick around for conversation, but I do want to respect that people, have lives that aren't me yammering over a PowerPoint. So what do we do, right? So these are kind of the questions we were asking. Do we log off? Do we just give it all up entirely? Do we become Luddites and just smash it like my friend Natalie Wynn here? She's not my friend, but I admire her. Smashy, right? What do we do? So this is where I come back to those quotes we started with, right? The church's new world will require a creative embrace of technology and new media, not as substitutes, but as inspired and strategic vehicles of ministry and mission. In Paul's words, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds, so that you may discern what is the will of God. And a note real quick, a theological note on the world. When Paul talks about it, you probably saw also the flesh and sin earlier. I just want to add this sidebar that, and I get this insight from my friend, the Reverend Kai Daniel, I forgot his last name, Moore, who's a pastor in the Presbyterian Church in the USA, a queer theologian, a doctoral student at the GTU Berkeley, and known to his roller derby friends as Bruce Almighty. But Kai talks about how when Paul is talking about the world or the flesh, he's not saying that he hates the body. He's not saying that he hates the created world. Or in our case, it's not that we hate technology, right? It's not about hating what exists. It's a contrast between two different worldviews or two different value systems. In Paul's writing, and I think when we talk about technology, this is super applicable. The world is rather worldly values, the oppression, the empire, the spectacle, right? Those things that are not connected to our deepest and truest selves and to God. Whereas for him, spirit is godly values, right? So love, justice, solidarity, incarnation, connection, community. And so my take on how do we engage with technology is we be in the world, we be in, we are part of this interconnected world. We are part of this digital century, but not of it. We engage, as Tina was talking about, intentionally and drawing on our values and our gifts as spiritual community to use the tools that we have, things like the internet or social media or Zoom or YouTube, that go against the grain, that serve our purposes rather than the purposes of the tech barons who try to manipulate us for profit. And my three kind of frameworks for that, what does it look like when we do hybrid church? How do we use the internet intentionally? Well, in the first place, I'd say it needs to be relational, right? And this goes back to something that I think both Dottie and Yvonne were talking about in terms of, hybrid church, this thing that's going to come out of COVID. It's going to need to be geared toward cultivating deep and meaningful relationships as opposed to simply generating engagement. So this is, I think, what is it called? Sacred Practices is a perfect example of what this could be like. A meditation group, having online meetings and worship that remain accessible to people even when they're physically distant or unable for any other reason to come to worship. Prayer gatherings. We had a beautiful one for our friend Terry Brewster about a month and a half ago. And it was great to be able to have that meeting over Zoom so that people could plug in from a number of different places. These are ways that we use technology in a way that's relational, in a way that builds on and cultivates and deepens relationships rather than the simulacrum of connection that results from getting likes on Twitter. In the second place, I think it needs to be educational, that we can use the internet as this incredible tool to reach people where they are and teach them about progressive Christian values and practices and spirituality. You know, I can't tell you the number of times I've had to have the conversation. I say, oh, I'm a pastor in the United Church of Christ. I'm the pastor at a church, or I'm a minister at a church, a UCC church in Long Beach. And people are like, what's the UCC? What's the United Church of Christ? Wait, there are progressive Christians? You know, this is, I can't count the number of times I've had that conversation. And the internet, because it allows us to reach people over the medium of YouTube, over the medium of Facebook, of social media, these are ways that we can actually communicate our values and communicate about who we are and help educate people that, yeah, actually churches that ordain queer people exist. Yeah, actually churches that believe Black Lives Matter exist. Yeah, churches that take COVID seriously exist. And we've already been doing that. Something like this, for instance, this is an online, you know, this online class, seminars, and, you know, I've done online writing workshops that have been beautiful, or our Sacred Practices group, teaching people not just about our values, but teaching actual ways to spiritually practice in your home. Those are awesome ways we can do it. And this is a particular pet project of mine, but I think about using YouTube and videos and video essays. You know, there's a lot of content out there. If you go looking for progressive Christian educational materials, like I do often, it is part of my job description after all, there's a dearth of stuff out there. There's some really good stuff, but there's not, I think, enough. And a lot of it is, if you're not a theologian, or if you don't already go to a UCC church or a progressive Lutheran church or what have you, the language can be alienating. It can be difficult to understand. I think there are a lot of people who have been burned by the language of church and God and Jesus, but who I think would, I know, in fact, do respond well to the kinds of community that we do at First Church and at other progressive UCC churches, the kinds of justice work we do, the kinds of worship we create, where people are welcome across a broad spectrum of identities. And I think that there's an opportunity in the world of YouTube and other platforms to create more educational things, to, you know, perhaps take the lessons from this seminar and make a 10 or 15-minute video out of it that we could share, not just with people from our church, but people from our wider community, people from other churches, with the wider UCC, right? This is something that I'm actually very excited about, creating this kind of content. And the people I put up on screen, I didn't mean to make all of them trans women, but that's just how it turned out, are three of my favorite YouTubers. Natalie Wynn at top left, Abigail Thorne at the right, and then Kat Black on bottom. And they all create these really gorgeous, hilarious, insightful, smart, funny video essays that, you know, get millions of views and that get people thinking about things like trans rights, or things like sexuality, or get, you know, Abigail Thorne does something called Philosophy Tube, where she explores philosophical ideas and applies them to you know, like contemporary questions, and it's all very funny and very, very accessible in a way that I don't see a lot being done in the church. And so this is something I would love to see more of. I think it's a way that people can be reached where they are, like literally physically, from their homes, from their phones, from their computers. But there are, of course, other possibilities, and I think the educational uses of the internet are one of our, to kind of go back to what Dale was saying, the fact that we have so much information at our fingertips can be a tool in our toolbox. Number 3, I think our church needs to be incarnational. This is what Judy was saying about embodiment, that hybrid church, even when we use the internet, even when we use social media, even when we use Google Teams, even when we use Zoom or YouTube, it has to be grounded in people's real experiences and real struggles for justice and liberation, right? And I mean this in our personal lives, like the personal lived experience of eating food, of being with people, of worshiping in the same space, of, you know, the way of the embodied practice of meditation, of walking, of being in nature, right? it also applies to our activism work. You know, I think one of the problems of online is that, remember, the spectacle convinces us that it is real and real life is fake. And so I think there's this way in which a lot of online activism, hashtag activism, can become really performative and hollow, right? Amber Lee Frost, who's a writer and podcaster and labor organizer, often says that the goal of online in terms of activism is to get people offline. The goal is not simply to get people to tweet a hashtag or to share a Facebook post, but actually to get out and vote, to knock on doors, to show up to demonstrations, to go to city council meetings, to actually go out and do the work of building movements and building community and building relationships. And so I think that whatever we do with our online, it needs to be grounded in and tend toward feeding both spirits and bodies, bread as well as roses, to quote last Sunday's worship service, and giving us tools, connecting us, not so that we can just stay online, but so that we can go out into the world and make it a better place, whether that's in our personal lives, in our own spiritual practice, in our families, and in our actual physical church that we share, or the wider world of social and ecological justice. And so I have gone 6 minutes over time. So I'm going to offer up, if folks would like to head out, please feel free to do so. Some of you may already have done so, as a matter of fact. But I do want to, open up room for people, and we were already having a bit of this conversation, to, do you have any thoughts or questions? What are some of the ways you see possibilities for the kind of community that I've been talking about? What are thoughts that you wanted to have a chance to express over the course of my conversation tonight that you haven't had a chance to? Are there any takeaways or any things that you're thinking would be a really cool way to move forward with hybrid church? I think just kind of an open dialogue for those who want to stick around and have it. Anything? Or are we kind of full up at this point? A lot of words, right? A lot of Zoom.
Well,
Tina, did you have something?
You afterwards about next Sunday. That's my concern.
Yeah.
I just want to say how much it resonates with me. What you did put up is the, kind of 3 prongs of how to think about this and work with this, and the importance of the relational, the educational, and the incarnational. And I'm also very excited about the ideas for creating educational content that can be a way to kind of carry the passion and excitement of who we are beyond our walls in more ways.
Thank you. All right. Dottie had her hand up, and then Pam has hers.
Yes, I want to thank you. I really was torn because I did have a deadline project, which I got finished. So I was able to come and join seriously for a big part of it. But I think the fact that we have a tool and we already have some experience because of circumstances sort of forcing us to learn how to use it, that we don't need to just give it away, because we can sit in the same pew together, even if it's 6 feet apart, for a while. And I'm kind of interested and challenged by the notion of hybrid, because the people that I'm used to seeing face to face may choose to view from their couch. So I may not get what I want if I go to the building. And I have to learn to be okay with that. My garden church that I go to, as well as First Congregational, we literally are in a garden. So we don't have a building to protect expensive equipment. So we're right now struggling with what we're going to do, and we're trying some experiments. But one of our key beloved people is not going to join us because she's not yet ready to affiliate with people at church. She has a job where she's amongst people, and she just needs some space on the weekends. So it really makes me very aware of the value of utilizing the tools that we have learned to make us able to continue to have some some sense of connecting, even though we're apart. So I'm both excited and cautious about the hybrid notion, but I think it's wonderful that we have that opportunity.
Yeah, you and me both, Dottie. Pam.
Yeah, I agree with both what Tina and Dottie said. I think going through this pandemic, all of us together in this virtual online tool that we have really saved us in many respects, because without the YouTube and the Zoom and the ability to keep church, although it was different going, who knows where we would be. So I think I'm excited that, and from talking to leadership, and that the intent is to keep some type of virtual online service going, because what I find exciting is people who've moved away come back, and you see them chatting, like Deanna and Linda and I can't remember, the people in Arizona and Florida. And it just gives us such an opportunity that, yes, they've moved away, but they're still part of us. They're still worshiping with us. And to me, that's very exciting. And I like a lot of what you said, Tom, building content. I mean, you're very good at this, and I'm hoping that's something that you'll find time to do, and that we grant you the time to do that, because we're in a new world, we really are. And, we say, oh, we want to go back to the old normal. Well, normal has changed, and we'll take some of those things from the past and reimagine them, move them forward, but things are different, and it gives us an opportunity to do things differently.
Well, amen to that. I feel like that's a pretty good benediction, as a matter of fact. The last thing I want to do with y'all is one, and I think we brought this out, is that, oh, let me start my video back up again. I didn't want to blank out on you. Is that one of the cool things about, being church and being on Zoom is that we get to pray together, right? And it's one of those ways that we go against the grain, as Tina was talking about, that we use technology in a way that actually deepens our connection rather than pulls us apart. So I thought, by way of closing, we could share that prayer that we pray every Sunday that reminds us who we are and what we believe. And then actually our friend Dale will be co-preaching about this Sunday. So as you feel comfortable, you can mute yourselves, you can unmute yourselves. I would invite you to end our conversation tonight with our common prayer, to remember that we are in the world, but not of it, and that we are called to not be conformed, but to be transformed. If you would pray with me. Eternal Spirit, Earth Maker, Pain Bearer, Life Giver, Source of all that is and that shall be, Mother and Father of us all, loving God, in whom is heaven, may the hallowing of your name echo through the universe. The way of your justice be followed by the people of the earth. With the bread we need today, feed us. For the hurts we inflict on one another, forgive us. In the time of temptation and test, strengthen us. From trials too great to endure, spare us. From the grip of all that is evil, free us. For your reign is in the glory of the power that is love, now and forever. Amen. And that is it. Finished. I have a list of sources for anyone who's curious, and I can make the PowerPoint available if anybody would like to have it. And we'll have this Zoom recorded so that folks who missed it can hear the learning we did together. I really appreciate all of you contributing so much and for sticking around. It's 8:45, or for Yvonne, I guess it must be almost midnight. So, woo! All right. Thank you so much, everybody.
Good night.
Thank
Let yourselves
you,
out.
Tom.
Good
You're
night,
awesome.
everyone.
Thank
Have
you.
a great night.
Everybody.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, everyone. Good night, everybody.
Night.
Nice to see you, Ethan. He's out already. That's cool. All right, it's me.